Hi, my name is Veronica Fabian, and I am excited to be able to share with you my compendium and e-portfolio on education and immigration within the US. Um, if you have already had a chance to go through the e-portfolio, I hope that I can reiterate some of the key points. If you have yet to go through, I hope to showcase some of the key takeaways that I'm hoping that you get from reviewing the compendium. So, to give a quick overview, I will be reviewing two social justice issues that are currently and historically um, provoking heated debate within the United States. Those two would be education and immigration. So, starting with education, I will be reviewing ways in which the U.S. whitewashes U.S. K through 12 public education curriculum and centers nationalism by doing that. I will then review immigration from Latin American countries and the trauma that is endured by these immigrants who make the trek to the US and the trauma that is also endured at the border. I'll be combining these two different social justice issues and discussing education for immigrant youth, specifically the educational conditions for immigrant youth within detention centers and shelters, and once they enter the public education space, and then hoping to share my the additional research that I will be conducting on the framing of the need for immigrant education. So, getting started with the US education system, through my compendium, you'll explore the idea of the cosmopolitan. The cosmopolitan is somebody who centers more of a global community than than nationalism. And so you'll be able to see how the US centers itself within the curriculum that's offered in public education, and the idea of nationalism, um, and how both whitewashing curriculum and centering nationalism, both of these things combined, really create a hostile narrative towards immigrants, even at a young age. So, moving along to immigration, you will see the idea of bare life, which is reducing individuals to nothing more than being human with no legal or political rights. Hopefully, you will be able to see the stories and read the stories of the horrible conditions that lead to immigration into the U.S., and then also learn more about the path that some of these migrants face when they are making their way into the U.S., and the death that comes along with that at the hands of the U.S. through deterrence measures. You you can read about this through the different resources that I also have provided and through the essays that I've provided specifically around trafficking into the US from Mexico and the essay on bare life. You will also see that once these individuals make it to the border, there is a whole slew of additional injustices, including family separation, that takes place and creates just immense trauma, and also the conditions in which some of these individuals live, being cramped into shelters and being there for longer than the legal amount that they should be there, tent cities, and just minimal necessities once they have entered the US. So you'll be able, hopefully, to read these stories. My goal is that you'll, through these different stories and of conditions that lead to immigration or migration, the conditions at the border, the conditions once here, you'll really be able to see the full story of these individuals and how the US reduces them to nothing more than bare life. Moving on to education for immigrant youth. I was fortunate to host an interview with the Young Center for Immigrant Children's Rights, where I was able to learn firsthand the conditions of education for immigrant youth. So, through the interview, I learned that there was no special education testing for youth that enter the shelters, forcing some youth to not only learn from a place of immense trauma, but also in a way that does not take their learning needs into consideration. I also learned about the curriculum that is used and how it's based on a 30-day stay, which the interviewee mentioned is perfectly fine for those that stay 30 days or less, but for those who stay longer, has to get repeated. So this is obviously not a sign of quality education. And then lastly, I think it goes without saying for many people who work in education and who've worked with immigrant youth before, or even with not immigrant youth, but just within the U.S. public education, that there is a large need for mental health resources. And this is even deeper for immigrant youth who come with so much recent trauma from their time in the detention centers, their time working, navigating through the system, especially unaccompanied minors who are doing this alone, their path, their trip from their home country to the U.S. and the dangerous conditions that had that came with, and then what made them leave in the first place. It could be consistent natural disasters or threat of life. And so there's just such deep, deep trauma that youth have to face that is not taken into consideration, or maybe is known, but as the U.S. is not doing enough to address these issues to be able to provide a real quality education for these youth. So that's what you'll review in my compendium. What I'm hoping to do is continue my research. I am hoping to look at the framing of the need for education for immigrant youth as adding an economic value versus being human-centered. So even for nonprofit organizations or political advocates, how centering the idea that immigrant youth should be allowed quality education because they provide economic value to the US, rather than because it is a basic human right that they deserve. So I'll be conducting additional research in Max QDA, analyzing LA Times articles, over 2,000 articles, and hopefully being able to provide a deeper analysis on the narrative that gets shared. So that may or may not be included in the compendium at this time, but hopefully will be added soon, as this is something that I feel like is needed in this space. So in conclusion, I wanted to share that quality education is a human right. Youth who enter the U.S. are escaping corruption, disaster, or really coming for a better life, and they're making a dangerous. They're taking on a dangerous path to get here. And then once they're here, the trauma doesn't stop. They are still subject to inhumane detention center conditions, and the education does not meet their deep needs. Education can be an equalizer. I really do believe that, but the US education system is not set up for everybody to succeed. We start from youth, prioritizing those within our own borders and centering nationalism. My preliminary research also shows that when we frame immigrant education, we frame it in a way that they are adding economic value to society, rather than they deserve this because it's a human right. I hope, again, to continue my research exploring that specific topic, and I hope to continue to be an advocate for Brown and Black youth within the US. I hope that you have enjoyed reading my compendium, and I hope to continue to add more to it as well. So thank you for your time. Thank you.